Some silences don't echo back. They just settle. I hadn't unpacked yet. The duffel sat by the door name tape, barely clinging to the side seam where it frayed after the last deployment. I left it that way. Not out of laziness, just a quiet reluctance to smooth what had already unraveled. The message came in as I was scrolling through flight confirmations. A photo first, then a line beneath it. Your parents' anniversary party looks incredible. You must be so proud. I tapped the image open. A wide ballroom ivory lights, woven into branches gold-trimmed table cards, my father, in a suit I hadn't seen before. My mother in blue satin smile, angled to the left like she was scanning for the next camera. Hallie stood between them, shoulder slightly tilted, as if she'd been told where her good side was. The banner overhead read, "Family, the foundation of every mission." I read it twice, then once more slower, not to admire the font, just to feel the space where my name wasn't. There was no invite. No, you're coming right. No email marked for family only. I searched my texts. Nothing, not even a forwarded evite that might have been meant for someone else. I didn't scroll further. I just stared at the glow of that banner and realized something had been decided a while ago quietly, and I'd missed it. I dialed my father. He picked up on the third ring. There were too many RSVPs, he began, as if this were logistics. Your mother figured well. She figured it might not fit your schedule. A pause, then softer, but not warmer. You're always gone, Nora. We assumed. I waited. He filled the air too fast. You know how things get with the guest list, politics donors, that sort of thing. Hallie handled the seating, I think. Another beat. My voice didn't rise. You celebrated 40 years of marriage, and I saw it in someone else's text. He cleared his throat. It wasn't personal. That was the part that caught. Not personal. The text from my mother arrived an hour later. The party didn't seem like something a lieutenant colonel would prioritize. I'm sure you understand. The screen dimmed before I moved. I unfastened the silver pin on my collar, set it on the table beside an empty tea mug. The rim still bore a faint lipstick stain, the kind no dishwasher ever really touches. My hand hovered near it, then pulled back. I wasn't thirsty anymore. It wasn't the party. It wasn't the missing invitation. It was the certainty in her wording like she'd edited out a daughter, and the sentence still read, "Fine." I walked to the closet and pulled out the tan blouse I hadn't worn since my last promotion. A thread along the shoulder seam had come loose. I'd meant to fix it. I never did. That evening, Hallie posted a photo from the party. She stood beside a man with a polished beard and a wine glass. Her caption, "Home, is where you're celebrated, not just where you were born." I didn't react. I clicked out of the app. My thumb lingered over the message icon, but I didn't type. I remembered the gift I had sent last month. A framed photo of my parents in front of our old house. I'd taken it before boot camp when they'd asked me to mow the lawn one last time. I'd gotten the frame engraved, "Where you begin doesn't leave you." No one mentioned it, not even a thank you. The jacket still hung on the chair. I picked up the name tape. Ashford stitched in black block letters. The thread on the F was loose, pulling like it didn't want to hold. I didn't sew it back. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that knows it isn't waiting for anything. I turned off the overhead light. Only the hall lamp stayed on, casting a faint, narrow line across the carpet. Once during a field hospital rotation, I'd stitched a child's scalp in a tent under a flickering bulb. The wound had split across the hairline, barely an inch long, but deep. I'd cleaned, numbed, closed. No one thanked me, but the scar healed clean. I thought of that boy now, not his face, just the sound he made when the pain hit. A short, high intake of breath, and then nothing, like he'd decided he wouldn't make a sound if no one would know what to do with it. That's how this felt. That held breath. No explosion, just a choice. I didn't reply to my mother. Not that night. Not the next morning. I laid the silver pin in its box. The latch clicked shut with a hollow sound. She'd said I would understand. And maybe I did. Maybe that's what I couldn't look away from. Some people earn their peace by speaking up. I earned mine by staying quiet. There were years when I measured worth by how little I needed. Fewer requests meant fewer disruptions. That seemed to please people. I got good at folding myself into the corners of rooms, waiting until someone noticed, but not so long that they felt guilty. I remembered sitting on the floor of the church hall, arranging chairs in neat rows for my uncle's retirement party. No one asked me to do it. Hallie arrived an hour later in white jeans and lip gloss, arms full of balloons. "They want the gold ones in front," she called out, already walking away. I moved the gold ones forward. That night, my mother introduced Hallie as our little visionary to a family friend. I handed out water bottles in the background. I knew which ones had the broken seals. I gave those to the adults who never drank anything anyway. Later, when we cleaned up, Hallie pretended to be allergic to bleach. My father laughed and said, "Classic, Hallie." I stayed until the floor dried. I don't remember ever being told to behave. I just knew that behaving meant fewer explanations. I made my bed before school brought in the mail, before it hit the ground, wiped down counters after dinner. I don't think anyone noticed, not because they were cruel, just because I never gave them a reason to. My high school counselor once asked if I'd considered applying to Stanford. I brought it up at dinner that night. My mother didn't look up from her plate. That's a lot of debt for someone with your temperament. Hallie had decided to major in studio art around the same time. My mother printed her class schedule and highlighted the words independent study like it was prophecy. I chose military medicine because it sounded solid, and she liked solid. The day I got my acceptance letter, I laid it on the kitchen counter. She moved it to set down the grocery bags. I waited for her to circle back. She didn't. The next morning, my father nodded once when he saw it. "It'll teach you not to complain." He meant it as a compliment. At the officer's reception, when my rank was first announced, I wore the navy blue blazer my mother had mailed me 2 years prior. The shoulder seams puckered. I didn't tailor it. I thought maybe if she saw me in it, she'd remember sending it. She didn't comment on the blazer or the ceremony, but she posted a photo of Hallie holding a vintage camera with the caption, "She sees beauty where the rest of us miss it." Once, when I asked to come home for Christmas, she paused, then said, "It's not ideal timing." I checked the calendar afterward. No one had a surgery. No one was moving. Hallie went to Aspen that year. The mug I kept at my bunk had a hairline crack down one side. I used it anyway. Warm water pooled in the break cooled faster than the rest. I liked how it reminded me that even steady things fracture quietly. I sent care packages on Hallie's birthdays. Once I knitted her a scarf during overnight rotations. She thanked me with a 3-second voicemail. "It's pink, right. I'll try to match it with something." She never posted a picture wearing it. My mother used to call me her solid one. She meant I didn't cause problems, but she also meant I didn't need tending. Hallie was my little light. I never asked what that made me, maybe the fixture. I learned how to self-regulate. I kept granola bars in my uniform pocket. I never cried in public. Once, when I dislocated a shoulder during a live drill, I popped it back in myself. The medic whistled. "You're tougher than you look." I didn't respond. What would have been the point? Tough meant reliable. It meant silent. It meant I didn't make a scene when things didn't go my way. I remembered walking into my childhood bedroom 2 winters ago. The posters had been taken down. My old books boxed and stacked in the hallway. A new sewing table had been set up. My mother waved her hand toward the window. We needed the space for Hallie's project portfolio. There was no discussion, just reallocation. She'd left one drawer intact. Inside a tangled bracelet, 2 worn postcards, and a folded index card with my high school GPA written in black Sharpie. I'd left it there the day I got my acceptance. I guess no one had reason to open it since. At the bottom of that same drawer was a ring I used to wear when I thought dressing up mattered. The metal had dulled the band too tight now. I held it between my fingers and let it slide back into the drawer. "Hallie has such a gentle way about her," my mother once remarked during brunch as if I weren't across the table. "Not like Nora. Nora's always been efficient." I chewed slower. I never confronted her, never said I heard that. I let the comment stand because it was meant to. Even in basic training, I became the one people came to when their laces snapped or their forms were off. I rewrote 3 field reports for someone who later told our CO he'd done them himself. I didn't correct the record. 1 year I gave my parents a framed photo from a humanitarian mission in Turkey. It showed me lifting a girl from rubble. My father placed it in the den behind a plant. A month later, it was gone. When I asked about it, my mother shrugged. "We didn't want visitors thinking you were trying to prove something. I think that's when something small went still in me. I stopped sending updates, stopped looping them in. When promotions came, I shared with my PCO with my team. I left the family thread quiet. They didn't notice. I wasn't angry. I was just done offering proof. And still, when I didn't show up, they never asked why. They just filled the space, reassigned it, repainted it, rearranged the narrative. I was never the problem, but I was always the afterthought. And maybe for a long time that felt like safety. Now it feels like erasure done politely. Some recognitions never leave a mark because they never landed in the first place. I kept the award certificate in a file marked Records, not Urgent. It sat between deployment rosters and expired insurance forms. No frame, no glass, just the paper itself matte cream-colored with my name typed in block font. I'd sent a photo of it to the family thread, not to show off, just to confirm I still existed in their frame. 3 days later, Hallie posted a mirror selfie in a silver cocktail dress with the caption, "Beverly Hills calls for confidence." The comments below hers numbered over 200. Mine got a heart from my aunt, and nothing else. I'd stopped rereading old texts around that time. There was a year Hallie forgot our mother's birthday. I remembered. I ordered flowers, wrote a note in cursive, because I knew she liked it that way. The delivery confirmation formed through just before my second night shift in Jordan. I'd been holding pressure on a corporal's neck wound when the message buzzed. That night, my mother posted a photo of the bouquet with the caption, "She always finds the sweetest surprises." Hallie makes my days brighter. I didn't forward the receipt. I didn't correct the story. A month later, Hallie sent me a video of her singing backup vocals at a bar in Los Feliz. "You should visit sometime. The guy I'm seeing has connections." I wrote back, "I'll check my schedule." I didn't. The message stayed unread. When I was 8, I started collecting pins, military mostly. I lined them up inside a cigar box and used foam from an old pillow to keep them in place. One night after dinner, I told my mother I wanted to go to West Point. She reached for her water glass, didn't look up. "That's a lot of pressure, sweetheart," she said. "You're not exactly built for that kind of strain." I remember nodding even as my hands curled tighter around the box. By 17, I'd taped a West Point brochure to my bedroom wall. The next week it was gone. Too many brochures everywhere, she'd said. "We don't want the room feeling cluttered." Hallie had 20 mood boards taped to her ceiling. She called it inspiration. My mother called it vision. I didn't mention the missing brochure again. Applied to Walter Reed instead. At Fort Riley, I once stitched a ruptured artery using a safety light and gauze strips. When I sent an update home, the reply came 2 weeks later. "Hallie's show opens next Thursday. Wish you could be there." I wore a bracelet, then silver with a narrow clasp that always caught on gloves. I stopped wearing it after that reply. It sat on the desk for a while. One day I found it twisted open, the latch bent. I threw it away without trying to fix it. I didn't talk about work much after that. During a family video call that Christmas, my mother turned her phone toward Hallie's table spread. She did it all herself, every dish. There's something so warm about her touch. I was on base in Qatar. My plate held a boiled egg and a protein bar. No one asked how my shift went. There was a habit. She had my mother. She liked to lean forward slightly before saying things she thought sounded balanced. "She's always been steady," she once told a neighbor about me. "Hallie's the creative one, of course. But Nora, she's very good at following through." The neighbor smiled politely. I finished raking the leaves. I remembered the exact moment I realized I wasn't proud of being dependable. It was during Hallie's graduation dinner. She didn't graduate technically, but we celebrated her anyway. She stood at the head of the table, wine in hand, wearing a blazer she'd borrowed from me 2 years earlier and never returned. My mother raised a toast to the one who always leads with her heart. Then she looked at me and added, "And to the one who keeps us grounded." I lifted my glass. The water tasted flat. The next morning, I found my travel mug on the porch bench, half-full lid missing. I knew I hadn't left it there. The tea had gone cold and turned the color of old copper. I poured it out and didn't mention it. I kept a journal during deployments. Not for thoughts, just for lists, supplies, notes on local pharmacies, rotation coverage. In the margins, I sometimes noted things I wasn't sure were real. The way my mother's voice sounded lower when she spoke to me. Ijan, the way Hallie never said my name in photos. The way birthdays became footnotes unless they belonged to someone else. Once I wrote, being remembered and being included are not the same. At my last promotion ceremony, the officer pinning my rank asked, "Any family in attendance?" I shook my head. "Not this time." He nodded. "They'll be proud when they see the photos." I didn't correct him. The gold pin had a small scratch along the back edge. I ran my finger over it before sliding it into place. It stayed on my uniform for exactly 7 months before I removed it. Not out of disillusionment, just wait. When Hallie visited the base once short, unexpected, unplanned, she looked around the barracks and said, "I don't know how you live like this." So grey. I offered her a seat. She declined, looked at her phone. Before she left, she hugged me quickly and whispered, "You're stronger than I thought." I didn't respond. I didn't know if she meant it or if it was a line she thought I needed. I remember that moment more than the whole visit. There's a photograph of the 4 of us, me, Hallie, our parents taken in front of the fireplace at a family friend's anniversary party. I remember Hallie's heels kept sinking into the lawn, so I gave her my arm. Her smile looks effortless. Mine doesn't. That photo made it to the Christmas card. My name didn't. They used the caption, "Wishing you warmth from our family to yours." That was the year I stopped bringing gifts home. Now, when I see photos of them together posing curated, I don't flinch. I just take note, and then I place that note beside the others. Not as evidence, not as defense. Just as record. Some betrayals don't shout. They sign paperwork in quiet rooms. I wasn't looking for anything when I opened the drawer. I only needed a pen. There were dozens scattered across the house on counters inside old coffee mugs, wedged between cookbooks. But something in the way the light hit that corner of the desk made me pull instead of search. The envelope was sealed. The paper inside had that smooth, grainy texture of something that wasn't meant to be folded often. The letterhead had the family attorney's name, Atwood and Miles, and a neat, precise font underlining the words, "Revised property transfer, Ashford Estate." I didn't rush. I read every word slowly the way I would review a field incident report. First paragraph, reassignment of deed. Second, effective immediately. Third reason for redistribution. Beneficiary updated based on geographic proximity, ongoing involvement with the property and family consensus. Family consensus. My name wasn't listed. Hallie's was. In bold. Twice. There was a footnote: Nora Ashford currently holds no ownership interest in the home located at 27 Lanebrook Drive. No mention of prior contributions. No clause for reconsideration. Just absence presented as neutrality. I placed the papers back exactly as I'd found them. The pen stayed in the drawer. Later that morning, my father stood by the garden bed near the fence, tugging at a stubborn root. His gloves were worn smooth at the palms. A small patch of soil clung to the cuff of his jeans. He looked up. "Still keeps its shape, doesn't it, this yard? Always bounces back." I nodded. "Still looks like it did." He grinned without turning fully toward me. "Hallie's been doing a good job keeping things up. I kept my hands in my jacket pockets. She's planning to repaint the shutters soon. Blue, I think. Said it gives the house more warmth." I waited. We figured since she's the one close by, it just made sense. No apology, no explanation. Only the same logic people use when they shuffle chairs. Someone has to sit, someone has to stand. Your mother thought you'd be too busy. Legal things take time. We didn't want to complicate things with your schedule. That word again. We. Not one decision. Not one signature. We. He stepped back from the soil, wiped his gloves on his thighs. "You know how these things go. It's just a house. The shingles on the roof had been replaced the summer before my deployment to Kuwait. I'd wired part of my hazard pay for the repairs. The receipt came to my email. I never mentioned it. I didn't bring it up now." He dusted his hands off. "Hallie's planning a little garden along the side fence. Lavender, maybe. She says the front needs a woman's touch." I looked at the shutters. The paint was fine. I remembered repainting them with him one summer, 14 years old, still small enough to need the ladder. I spilled the bucket once, and it left a smear across the driveway. He told me not to worry, that marks like that gave a place memory. Now, he was giving that memory to someone else, and calling it practicality. Later at lunch, my mother poured tea into a floral porcelain cup I'd never seen before. She handed it to Hallie. Then she turned to me, reached for the same mug I'd used the day before, slightly chipped handle, faintly stained. "We kept your favorite," she said, placing it in front of me. "It's always been here." I wrapped my fingers around the handle. It was warm, but not full. She unfolded a paper napkin. It's not about exclusion. It's about logic, Hallie's local. She can respond quickly if something happens. I didn't ask what kind of emergency required ownership over memory. She stirred her tea twice, then set the spoon down. You've always had more important things to manage, bigger responsibilities. There was no edge to her voice, just that soft firmness used by people who have convinced themselves of their own fairness. I took a sip. Too much sugar. You don't even live in Oregon anymore. She added, It wouldn't be practical. Hallie reached for the butter knife. I told her you wouldn't mind. No one looked at me when she said it. They never did when decisions had already been made. Afterward, I walked to the hallway where the family portraits used to hang. The arrangement had changed. My photo, the one from commissioning, was no longer there. In its place, a candid of Hallie, by the porch, golden light catching her hair, just so. A new narrative. New curation. In the guest room, the comforter was the same one from my childhood. The edge was torn near the corner where I used to grip it during nightmares. My name was still stitched into the underside in black thread, slightly faded. They hadn't removed it. They just stopped pointing to it. I sat on the edge of the bed. The floor creaked slightly under my boots. A drawer to the side table slid open without resistance. Inside, a single envelope sealed, addressed to Hallie. No stamp. Probably hand-delivered. I closed it. At dinner, no one brought it up. My mother refilled Hallie's glass. My father passed the salt. I said nothing. Hallie cleared her throat midway through the meal. I'm having some people over next month. Branding event. Might shoot a few promos in the backyard. No one looked at me. My mother nodded. That porch has such good light. I finished my plate slowly. The roast was dry. I chewed anyway. No one noticed when I set my fork down before the others had finished. No one paused. No one asked. Later, I stood by the staircase holding on to the rail longer than necessary. My father came to turn off the porch light. Sleep well, he said. The house is still yours to rest in. I didn't answer. I just looked at the hall mirror, the one with the slightly fogged edges where silver had worn thin. My reflection stayed whole even in the gaps. It wasn't about the house, or the deed. It was about the way they could erase me without leaving a mess. Some exits don't echo. They just close behind you, like breath on glass. The suitcase didn't make a sound when I lifted it from the carpet. I folded the blouse with the worn shoulder seam and tucked it beneath the uniform. The nameplate slid into the inner pocket, its corners pressing gently against the lining like it knew it didn't belong on the outside anymore. I didn't take much. A few folded documents, the book I never finished reading, and the small coin I used to keep in my right boot for luck. I placed the coin on top last. The lid closed without resistance. The house was quiet in the way churches sometimes are after the congregation leaves. Not holy, just emptied. There were voices in the kitchen. Low. Familiar. Don't guilt her, my mother said. It's her choice not to stay. A pause. She's always been distant. My father's reply was muffled, but I heard my name. Some people grow away from their roots. Maybe that's natural. No accusation. Just the kind of logic that gives itself permission. I stood by the hallway mirror and brushed a loose thread from my sleeve. The mirror caught my profile more than my face. The glass had a small fracture near the bottom corner, like a hairline scar. I never asked how it happened. It had always been there. I left the suitcase by the door while I walked into the dining room. The overhead light buzzed faintly, as if uncertain of its purpose. A ceramic bowl sat at the center of the table, filled with plastic fruit, the kind that never spoiled or ripened. I placed the house key just beside it on the placemat with the coffee ring that never came out in the wash. My handwriting felt strange as I scribbled the note on the back of a grocery list. I'll return when I'm invited, as Nora, not as obligation, not as shadow. The pen stuttered halfway through the word shadow. I didn't fix it. In the living room, Hallie's laughter rose briefly over the sound of silverware. I didn't look toward it. You know she takes things too personally, she said. And then, she's built for the outside world. Not this. There was no rebuttal, just the clink of dishes and the scrape of a chair leg on linoleum. I stepped into the front hall. The porch light hadn't been turned on. I reached for the door handle and paused, not out of hesitation, but because the silence had become almost too complete, like it needed something to anchor it. The photo frame on the entryway table had been changed again. Hallie, at some gala. Her hair curled just so, hand resting on the arm of a man I didn't recognize. The caption at the bottom etched in cursive, "Surround yourself with those who see your light." I looked at the frame for a long time but didn't touch it. There was no sound when the door opened, just the soft catch of the seal letting go. I didn't look back. The car engine turned over cleanly, as if it too had been waiting for a cue. No one stood at the doorway. No curtain shifted. No porch creaked with movement. Not because they hadn't heard me, but because maybe they never expected me to stay. I drove to the edge of town before pulling over near the diner we used to stop at after Sunday service. The neon sign still flickered, though the colors had dulled. I didn't go in. I just sat in the quiet, watching the light blink in and out like it couldn't decide whether to continue. Inside the glove compartment, there was still a folded paper from months ago, an old discharge summary, coffee-stained at the edge. I ran my thumb across the corner. The name typed at the top was mine, but it didn't feel like me anymore. Somewhere behind the diner, a train passed. Not fast, not loud, just steady. I rolled the window down. The air was dry, a little colder than it should have been, the kind of cold that settles without warning. I didn't cry, not because I was holding back, but because there wasn't anything left to prove by doing so. There's a weight that disappears the moment you realize you were the only one carrying it. I didn't leave to be seen. I left because silence was no longer survival. I didn't set an alarm that first day back. I opened my eyes before the sun reached the corner of the blinds. The barracks room was silent walls, bare floor cold. One chair, one desk, one bed I made with square corners. The digital clock blinked without sound. No notifications. No voices in the next room. No one telling me where to be or what time the others would arrive. I pulled the blanket back slowly. The sheet had a faint crease from my folded knee. I didn't smooth it. The coffee machine in the common area took longer than I remembered. I stood watching it, arms crossed, listening to the water heat in quiet protest. The mug I chose had a chip on the handle. I turned the floor toward my palm. No one walked in. No one asked why I wasn't home longer. No one asked anything at all. I sat by the window. The metal frame left a chill through my sleeve. Outside, the bass moved in its rhythms, jeeps, boots, salutes. But here behind the glass there was stillness, and I didn't have to explain it to anyone. My journal had dust on the edge, the pages had curled slightly. I opened to a blank line and wrote, without thinking, "I am Nora Ashford. I do not belong to a system that only pretends to see me." The pen dragged on the you in belong. I left it that way. A knock came later, more habitual than directed. It was just mail, one envelope forwarded from my mother's address, inside a flyer for a church fundraiser and a handwritten line in ballpoint at the bottom, "Hallie will sing Amazing Grace. If you're not too busy, they'd love to see both sisters together. No name, no greeting, no we miss you." I slid the flyer under the coffee machine, where the heat warped its corners through the day. At 1600, I ran 3 miles. I didn't time myself. I didn't wear a monitor, just breath shoes ground. At the 2nd mile, my side stitched, but I didn't stop. I let the pain come and go. It didn't need a name. It didn't ask for attention. Later, I filled out my own nutrition plan. Wrote it by hand. No apps, just pen and margin notes. More protein, less caffeine, no artificial anything. I cleaned the sink, threw out the mismatched socks I'd been meaning to replace for months, bookmarked an article on neuromuscular rehabilitation, marked it unread. The phone rang once that night. Caleb's name blinked. I picked up. "Told you I'd check in." I sat on the floor, back to the wall mug in hand. "I'm gathering what's left," I said, trying to figure what's still mine. A pause. Then, "Good. We can start from wherever, long as this time you choose." The call ended without a promise. That made it real. I didn't sleep immediately. I stared at the ceiling, letting my mind move without chasing it. At some point, I remembered a childhood memory I hadn't thought of in years. Hallie, pretending to be a nurse and me being the injured soldier. She giggled through the role play. I applied fake bandages and memorized vital signs. She moved on to dolls. I didn't. That night, I didn't dream. On the 2nd morning, I jogged before dawn. 2 birds followed me for half a block, low and steady. I didn't look back. At 1100, I emailed Colonel Bergstrom and asked to audit the base's trauma preparedness refresher. I didn't justify it. I just typed the subject line, attached my credentials, and signed it, Lieutenant Colonel N. Ashford. No reply by dinner. That was fine. In the shower, I scrubbed the back of my neck harder than usual. The mirror fogged up too quickly. I didn't wipe it clean. That evening, I unpacked the last box, one I hadn't opened since Jordan. Inside, the red field notebook still with sand caught in its spine. I thumbed through the entries. Notes on wound management. Names of medics I hadn't spoken to in a year. On the inside cover, a sticky note I'd long forgotten. The handwriting was mine, but the words felt borrowed from someone older. I didn't cry. I lit one of the base issue candles someone once gave me for Secret Santa. It smelled like cold linen and artificial rain. I let it burn without trimming the wick. By the 4th day, I started writing new protocols for my trauma training module. No one asked me to. I sent them to Caleb anyway. 1-line email. "Draft 1. I'll keep refining," he replied 6 hours later. "This sounds like you." That night, I boiled water just for tea. No sugar, no distractions, just heat cup, quiet. I sipped slowly and didn't touch my phone once. There's a tone people use when they need something, but don't want to sound like they do. 2 weeks after I left Oregon, the first message came through while I was walking back from the base clinic. I let it sit. When I opened it that evening, it read, "Can you send your military verification papers so we can update the home records? No greeting. No question about where I was staying or how I was adjusting. Just the kind of sentence that assumes cooperation." I didn't reply. The next morning, I found an email in my inbox. Subject line, "Small favor, urgent." It was from Hallie. 4 lines all about logistics. "They won't release the roof repair funds unless I have your signed acknowledgement. It's procedural." Just 1 line, Nora. Thanks in advance. No punctuation after my name. That seemed fitting. I didn't answer that one either. I let a week pass. During that time, I sat through 3 readiness meetings, drafted 2 reports for incoming medics, and switched out my old boots for a pair I bought myself. No one at the base knew what I was choosing not to say. That made the silence feel stronger. A letter arrived on a Thursday. Handwritten, careful strokes. My father's. Your mother says we need your presence to reprocess the will update. I'm told it's necessary you be there in person. The word presence struck me. Not input. Not voice. Just the act of being present, as though my name alone unlocked something they had misplaced. I made coffee and watched the steam rise against the cupboard. A week after that, Hallie tried again. She called twice. I let both go to voicemail. The second one was longer. I know things are tense. I don't want to fight, but the insurance deadline is coming up and you're still listed as co-owner, so if you could just send the form, I'd really appreciate it. No mention of the photo I never appeared in. No reference to the envelope I wasn't supposed to read. No question about why I left the house before dawn, or what I wrote on that folded piece of paper. It was all about signatures. At the PX, I ran into a young sergeant I used to train. He asked if I was back for the long. I shrugged. He grinned and said, "Must be nice to be needed everywhere." That word again. Needed. I walked past a family in the commissary that afternoon. A mother, 2 sons laughing about the cereal aisle. The older one asked, "Did you buy the good kind this time?" She rolled her eyes and handed him the box. "You're lucky I didn't forget you completely." He smirked. "You never do." They kept walking. I stood still. Back in my room, I opened the storage drawer where I kept old paperwork. One envelope was still sealed, inside the deed to the family house, co-signed 3 years ago when my father asked for help refinancing. At the time, he told me, "It's just a formality, Nora. You're steady." Hallie's still... Well, Hallie. Now, Hallie had it all. I closed the drawer and didn't move for a while. That evening, my phone lit up again. My mother, this time, just checking in. "Let us know if you're willing to reconsider. It's not personal, you know how these matters are." I stared at the screen. The word willing floated like an oil stain on water. They weren't apologizing. They weren't even pretending. What they needed was the version of me who still followed orders. The girl who used to clean dishes before anyone asked. The soldier who filled out forms, kept to timelines, made everything easier by not questioning motives. They didn't call me when I was standing in desert heat for 12 hours straight. They didn't write "wait." They didn't even text when I returned stateside. But now when roofs needed fixing and wills needed signatures, suddenly I had value. Not as a daughter, as a line item. I picked up the call this time. I didn't speak. My father's voice came through slow and composed. "You don't have to say anything. Just know we'd like to resolve this soon. It doesn't look right otherwise." I let the silence stay between us. He waited a few seconds, then hung up. In my closet, my dress uniform hung neatly. I ran my fingers along the hem of the jacket. A small thread was loose at the cuff. I tucked it back in. Later that night, I wrote a single line in my notebook. When they returned, they didn't knock. They calculated. Some names are only loud when someone else is holding the pen. I didn't call to explain. I didn't send a message to soften the edges. Instead, I filled out the transfer forms, quietly, cleanly. There were boxes for legal identifiers, Legacy funds, independent inheritance claims. I checked each one like I was restoring breath into a collapsed lung. The portion from my grandfather's trust hadn't been large, but it was mine. It had passed through my mother's name first, like most things did. For years I assumed that was normal. Now I understood that silence around money doesn't mean fairness. It only means no one's been caught asking. The officer at the Military Legal Center reviewed my request and nodded. "You're choosing to separate your records from the family trust," I didn't answer. I signed where it asked for clarity. I also submitted my application for a voluntary humanitarian mission in Guam. It was listed under Joint Civil-Military Medical Outreach, but the deployment was self-initiated. No sponsor, no internal memo. Just one line I wrote by hand, requested by Lieutenant Colonel Nora Ashford. Independent. The last time I applied for anything, my mother had proofread the form. Use a different email, it sounds too casual. Add you're bilingual. It makes you stand out. Mention your uncle was also in the Navy legacy counts. This time I didn't ask anyone to look over the paragraph. I wrote, reviewed, and sent it before dinner. Caleb found me after a morning jog, his face still damp. "You're writing again," I nodded. "About what?" "None of it's for anyone else to read." He reached for his thermos. "You're not explaining yourself as much lately." I stopped believing I had to. He grinned. "Took you long enough." In the evenings I began to run laps, not for regulation, but for rhythm. I replaced the performance tracker on my wrist with a plain watch that didn't beep. I timed by breath, not metrics. My body didn't race. It remembered. The mornings no longer started with external orders. No lists on the fridge, no group chats, pinging requests, no voice reminding me to stop by the florist or bring extra folding chairs. Just stillness, broken only by the sound of water boiling and the slow click of ceramic against countertop. I began to sleep through the night, not because I was finally tired, but because there was nothing to brace for. I went to the local bookstore and picked out a novel I once read in college, but never finished. This time I underlined what spoke to me instead of what I thought might look smart quoted. In my room, on the narrow desk near the window, I laid out 3 envelopes. One held the military deployment approval. One held my notarized separation from the shared estate. The third was blank. I used it to write a letter, not to my family, not to my commanding officer, but to a patient I'd treated years ago, a young medic who lost his hearing after an IED. He used to sketch birds in the margins of his recovery notes. I wrote, "You probably don't remember, but I remember your drawings. I hope you're still sketching. I never told you, but one of them helped me sleep the night we lost the convoy. I folded it neatly and mailed it without a return address. Not because I didn't want to be found, but because not all gratitude needs to circle back." One afternoon, my mother texted a photo of a garden statue she had installed beside the porch. A caption below it read, "Hallie thought of it. She always remembers the small touches." No mention of the bulbs I planted when I was 16. No reference to the hours I spent sanding the wood for the railing. No recall of the list I made perennials that could survive Oregon's winters. I didn't reply. I saved the photo in a folder marked miscellaneous. Later that week, a folder arrived from my old high school. Inside was a printed invitation, Distinguished Alumni Award nominee Nora Ashford. It had been submitted by one of my former instructors. I hadn't spoken to her in years. I placed it on the side table. I didn't frame it. I didn't discard it. That night, Caleb brought me a notebook. Brown leather, blank pages. "Write what doesn't need explaining," he said. I didn't open it until the next morning. I listed only one sentence on the first page. I'm no longer who I was. No period. No signature. Just the line waiting like I was for whatever came next. The moment I stopped waiting for an apology, something inside me settled. I folded the envelope, slowly pressing down the crease with my thumb, careful not to smudge the ink. It had only 2 items: a notarized document relinquishing my claim to the house on Sycamore Street, and a handwritten note that didn't ask for understanding. It just stated a fact: I am no longer part of this property. That is all. I didn't call ahead. I didn't tell Caleb. I didn't draft or rehearse anything. I only knew I had to hand it over myself, not out of ceremony, but clarity. The house looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was the absence of the marigolds Mom used to plant each spring, or the chipped paint near the doorbell I once scrubbed clean every summer. I knocked once, not loud. Dad opened the door. No surprise on his face, just a pause like someone reading a line of a book he had already finished. He didn't step aside. He didn't invite me in. His hand rested on the edge of the doorframe, knuckles pale. I handed him the envelope without words. He took it without asking what it was. The seal remained intact in his hand. He nodded once. You look thinner. I looked past him into the hallway. The framed photos hadn't moved. The one of Hallie in her white coat hung dead center. Mine in uniform was still angled slightly to the side. I'm fine. He glanced down at the envelope again. She doesn't know you're here. I didn't respond. He didn't press. For a long second we stood in that doorway, father and daughter. No accusations. No embraces, just a shared understanding that nothing more needed to be said. At least, not anymore. I turned and walked back down the driveway. My boots didn't echo like they used to. The wind had picked up, brushing my collar slightly out of line. I didn't fix it. There was no one waiting for me, no car idling with the engine on. I walked to the nearest stop, then changed my mind halfway and turned into the rest station near the edge of town. The kind with vending machines and stale coffee that always tasted like burnt toast. I ordered tea. The woman behind the counter didn't look up when she handed me the cup. That felt right. I sat at the plastic table by the window. The sun cast soft angles through the blinds. I folded the paper napkin in thirds, then again into a square, then let it rest beneath the cup. The cup left a faint circle of moisture, a quiet imprint. I traced it with my finger. No one was punished. No voices were raised. I hadn't declared anything, but the letter had weight. Not legal, not financial, just final. I remembered Mom once saying, some doors close on their own. Others you have to pull shut. At the time she was talking about the hallway closet. But I think she meant more. Hallie texted later that evening. I didn't read the full message. The preview said, "Did you stop by the house?" Dad looked, and that was enough. I archived it. The silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt deliberate. Caleb called a few days after. I picked up. Was it hard? I stirred a spoon in my tea, though there was nothing in it. No. Just quiet. He let the pause stretch. She'll never say sorry. I know. He cleared his throat. Are you okay with that? I looked at the watch on my wrist, not the one issued by the military. This one was a thrift store piece I'd picked up in DC. The leather was worn, the glass slightly scratched, but it kept time just fine. I think I don't need it anymore. A week passed. I mailed a copy of the signed release to the county records office. I included a note requesting no future correspondence be directed to me, Then I cleaned out my locker, not because I was leaving, but because I no longer needed to hold on to gear for the next person. Everything I kept because it belonged to me. I pinned one item above my desk, a sketch of a lone mountain range I'd drawn during deployment. I never showed it to anyone. The lines were crooked, the horizon uneven, but it was mine. There were no congratulations, no farewells, but I didn't need either. The house still stood, the family still functioned, birthdays were still celebrated, but I was no longer waiting to be included. Let them keep the silverware I once polished, the piano I practiced on, the attic where I stored my old journals. I'd carried the best of myself with me. Some stories don't end in confrontation. Some just end with an envelope left quietly on a kitchen counter. Or, in my case, handed off at the door to a man who understood everything in silence. And when the wind blew across the rest station parking lot, stirring a few brittle leaves along the curb, I took one last sip from the cup and watched the steam drift upward. The heat had faded, but it was enough. I never understood how silence could feel so complete until I stopped trying to fill it. I boiled water slowly, the way I had learned in Guam, never rushing the kettle, never forcing the steam. The cinnamon black tea I brought back still carried traces of that small field dispensary where everything was reused and nothing wasted. I had half a box left. It would last another month if I steeped each bag twice. The mug I used had a chip near the handle. Not enough to cut skin, just enough to make you hold it carefully. It had belonged to someone before me. A nurse named Hartley, who left it in a locker I was later assigned. I never returned it. It wasn't theft, it was inheritance by neglect. I suppose that's how a lot of things pass from one person to another. I didn't turn on the news. I didn't open my email. I didn't check the base updates. The room didn't ask anything of me. The chair creaked as I sat, its right leg still uneven from the time I repaired it with a folded ID badge. I could replace it, but I don't. The sound reminds me that even things designed to hold weight need adjusting sometimes. A message blinked on my phone. Caleb. What's the mission today? Colonel? I typed back slowly. No mission. That's the mission. No reply for a while. Then just, that's real progress. I left it at that. Some conversations are more complete when they don't stretch themselves thin, trying to say everything. The light came through the kitchen window in soft, imperfect stripes. I'd meant to fix the blinds for months. One side always stuck, slanting the beams like an unfinished thought. I let it be. The way it fell on the countertop reminded me of the old Sundays when I used to slice fruit for Hallie while she practiced her college auditions. I was never in the photos. My hands were. I opened the top drawer of my desk and pulled out 2 items. The Meritorious Service Medal. I had requested a duplicate of this one, unmounted, and a folded sheet of paper, yellowing at the edges. My own handwriting barely legible now. I once stayed silent to be accepted. Now, I stay silent to be myself. I hadn't written it for anyone. There was no audience. Just me on a cold afternoon holding the pen so tight, the ink had blotted the M in myself. The tea cooled fast. I drank it anyway. It tasted sharper that way. My phone lit up again. Margaret Ashford. 1 missed call. No voicemail. I didn't call back. The days of immediate reply had ended with the envelope I handed to my father. Once my mother told me, "You should be grateful. You have structure. Some people drift their whole lives, but I've learned that structure built by others becomes a cage if you stay too long inside it. Especially when the builders deny ever closing the door." Caleb used to joke that I planned my free time like a briefing. Back then, I'd write down dinner times, post-run shower windows, even 15-minute calls like they were operations. These days I don't keep a schedule unless I need one. I walk because my legs feel better afterward, not because of base metrics. I read because the stories take me somewhere no one else chooses for me. I write not for records, not for promotion, but because some thoughts deserve to be released from the mind and anchored on paper. There's a small cactus on the windowsill now. I bought it from a gas station 3 weeks ago. It leans slightly, like it's unsure of its place, but it hasn't wilted. I water it every Tuesday. Not too much, just enough. Someone once told me that healing looks boring from the outside. No revelations, no applause. Just clean dishes, quiet meals, 8 hours of sleep when you can get them. They weren't wrong. Last night I reread a report I'd written in Kandahar, filled with acronyms and casualty codes. I didn't feel anything. Not pride, not sorrow, just distance. It was like watching a version of myself I used to pilot like a machine. Efficient, resilient, praised, and unknown. I don't regret those years, but I don't carry them like proof anymore. This morning I brushed my hair without pulling it tight. I wore soft cotton instead of the regulation wool that always scratched behind my elbows. I ate slowly. No one measured how well I folded my blanket. No one called it discipline. No one called it lazy either. And in that gap between judgment and instruction, I found something that felt like peace. A memory surfaced my mother folding napkins during Hallie's graduation dinner. She looked at me not unkindly, but with absence in her eyes. You always make things harder than they need to be. I didn't respond then. Just placed the cutlery beside the plate, parallel, polished, exact. Now, I know the silence wasn't agreement. It was restraint, the kind that leaves scars if you wear it too long. Today I carry no words for her, not cruel ones, not forgiving ones, just none. That is my choice. That is my healing. The blinds trembled slightly as wind passed through the loose seal in the window. I could get it fixed. I probably won't. Some things I've decided are meant to hum quietly in the background, just to remind you that perfection isn't required. I reached for the medal again, held it in my palm. Not as a badge, as a weight, solid, earned, but no longer needed to define me. Outside, a sparrow landed on the railing. It stood there for a full minute, then flew off. No sound, no witness, just movement. I didn't chase it with my eyes. I didn't assign it meaning. I just noticed. That was enough. In the drawer under the paper and the medal, there's a photograph I never framed. It's not from a ceremony or deployment. It's a picture of me sitting on the ground, lacing my boots, half smiling at someone off camera. No ribbons, no uniform. Just me. As I was, before I learned how quiet strength could be.